long day. How's it going, everybody? It's your boy, Atypical Security Guard. I want to welcome you to tonight's stream. If you followed this channel this morning on my way into work, I told a story about a situation that I had back in 2021 with a Portland police officer, where he told me verbatim that he could tell me that he was going to kill me, and there was not a fucking thing that I could do about it. Without rehashing the entire story, it was a situation where clearly not only was I offended, I was threatened. Not only was I offended and threatened, I was greatly disappointed and hurt by the reaction because I was working in uniform at the time and was in the process of applying with multiple departments, Portland Police Bureau being one of them. It was during the time where everyone was kind of coming to grips and realities of policing in America, specifically policing as related to the Black community. So it was even more so a frustrating point of contention, right? But I thought that it was important to come on here and also share with you guys the part 2 to that story, because the story did not end with this one officer's horrendous verbiage to me. It did not end with me trying to go after this person's job, get some sort of transparency, some sort of accountability for the way that he treated me, the way that he had talked to me. It didn't end there. And I want to share with you guys the important part 2 to this story. So not long after this situation happened, the supervisor at the location where I worked and where I currently work, he was not happy with the way that I had gone about having this argument with this officer. I think that he felt in some regards that I might have been somewhat out of line with how I approached this officer, regardless of the fact that this officer said that to me. The supervisor that worked at this location was very sympathetic to what I was experiencing and what I was going through, and he wanted to hear more about why I felt the way that I did. But at the same time, business is business, right? And he felt that I might have put myself and I might have put the loss prevention officers that worked in this location in maybe a bad position, potentially in a situation where things could have gone south. They could have gotten physical, and then God knows what would have happened, right? There was always bigger things at play, and I was not focused on that in that moment because I was personally upset about how the situation went down. So for a brief couple of weeks, me and that supervisor, who I'm really good friends with now, right? And if he's watching this, he knows who he is. But at the time, that put a little bit of a wedge between he and I, because I felt like he wasn't understanding what I had experienced and what I went through. So fast forward 2 weeks later. At the time, we had a homeless person that would come and sit right outside the front doors. Now, the location where I work, there's literally an 8-foot wide sidewalk from the edge of the building all the way out to the street. It's only 8 feet, not very much room. This person would come, would sit down, and they had a German Shepherd. This person would sit and would smoke fentanyl, would shoot up heroin, would do all of the drugs that have been legalized, somewhat legalized here in Portland, and would do them right in front of the main door. If you were coming into the store, you had to walk past this person. If you were coming out of the store, you had to walk past this person. And at the time, there would be homeless people all on the closest area to the street, because that is qualified as public property, even though it's right in front of the store, right? So as people are walking into the store, there's fentanyl smoke and there's all kinds of nefarious things going on. And this guy had a German Shepherd. And the German Shepherd would lunge at people, and it would snarl, and it would bark, and it would nip, and it would bite. And people would be terrified. They would be terrified to come into the store. And this person would sit there, and they knew that because they were on public property, and because they were homeless, because they were drug addicted, and at the time in 2021, the Portland Police Bureau would not do anything, right? He knew that they were not going to come and say anything to him. Well, on one night, there was a man who was about 73, 74 years old. It was an immigrant man. And he's walking down that same sidewalk, same situation. This homeless person is sitting right there in front of the door. He has the dog. He's shooting up heroin. And as this 74, 75-year-old man walks by, the dog nips at the man, and the man falls. The man falls. He falls into the wall, and he's livid, rightfully so. He comes into the store, he's yelling, he's upset, he's got a little bit of a cut on his head, and he's like, that dog and that man assaulted me. That's not okay. I come down here all the time. I walk through here all the time. Everybody has to deal with that. Everybody has to see that. That is not okay. I want you to call the cops. So we call the cops. That supervisor who thought that maybe I was a little bit out of line, that maybe I was a little bit, too forward with how I was talking to the police officers, he comes down to talk to this 73-year-old man who has now been pushed up against the wall by this homeless person's dog. And he contacts the cops personally. The cops show up, they park right in the middle of the street, and they get out. They survey the scene. They see the elderly man, they see my supervisor, they see me, they see the homeless guy, and they see the homeless guy's dog. My supervisor walks over and he goes, hey, officers, that guy right there with that dog, the dog lunged at the guy. It pushed the guy up against the wall. The elderly man hit his head. That's the guy right there. And he's pointing to the homeless guy. And the cop looks at my supervisor and he goes, hey, go over there. Go over there. Back up. And my supervisor's like, look, hey, I work here. I'm the loss prevention manager. This is what happened. He goes, hey, what did I tell you? Go over there. And so my supervisor is like, what the fuck? Like, where's this attitude coming from, right? Cop goes over, talks to the homeless guy a little bit, comes over and he tells us, he goes, hey, look, this is an animal control issue. This is not a police matter, And the immigrant man is upset, and my supervisor, he loses it. He's like, are you kidding me? He's like, look at that guy's head. That dog jumped on him, pushed him. He pushed him up against the wall. He hit his head. How is that okay? Now my supervisor, he's equally as upset as I was 2 days earlier or 2 weeks earlier. He's like, I want your card. I want your name. I want your card. This is unacceptable. So now he's experiencing the same level of disconnect, the same level of, lack of willingness to get involved that I was dealing with. And he makes a complaint. Okay. So now for the next week and a half moving forward, he's making complaints. I've already put in my complaint. Now we both have a shared experience of officers responding and this being the response. I'm upset about what happened to me. He's upset about what happened to him. And he's telling me, hey, man, I apologize. Like, I get it. I see where you're coming from. I understand how you feel. This is not okay. I'm going to contact the Bureau on my end. You continue to contact the Bureau on your end. Like, something is going to have to give here. So we're both frustrated. Matter of fact, pretty much all of us that worked in this location were frustrated. And then one day, not too long after that, we had a guy. This guy would come into our store on a daily basis, would steal wine, would steal beer. He was a drunk, and he would get drunk and he would sit down in the aisles and he wouldn't get up, and we would have to coax him out of the store. We would have to beg and plead to get him up. Sometimes he would urinate on himself. Sometimes he would pass out. These situations where we just couldn't do anything with this guy, always inebriated. So he comes in, he steals a bottle of wine, he goes right outside and he sits on the sidewalk. Sidewalk faces a major road here in Portland, and he won't get up. He's completely inebriated, and it's like August, you know what I mean? Sun, hot, it's crazy. People are stepping over this guy. It's a bad situation. And we call the cops. Now, keep in mind my experience a month earlier, my supervisor's experience a week before this happens, and a police officer shows up by the name of Officer Bird. And Officer Bird was a former motorcycle cop. But during the entire defund movement, they had taken the motorcycle division away from the traffic side, and they had put this Officer Bird, he was an older officer, had put him back just working the beat. Now, my view of the Portland Police Bureau at this time is completely tanked. My supervisor's view is completely tanked, and we've got this guy that will not leave. Officer Bird shows up, and he comes in the consummate professional, right? He's talking to this guy, and this guy won't get up. We can't get him to move. And Officer Bird says, hey, what's your name? Hey, what day is it? What's your social? And the guy won't respond. He continues to ask him this question after question after question. And because the guy refuses to respond, Officer Bird says, well, hey, look, you're clearly drunk. And I'm paraphrasing here. Don't quote me. You're clearly drunk. You're not able to answer questions. You don't know what day it is. I'm going to put you on a psychiatric hold. And they were able to remove this guy based on that information. Now, while they're waiting for an ambulance to come and pick him up, a couple of Antifa show up. If you're in some other area outside of Portland, when I say Antifa, I know it's easy to think that I'm like making that up or I'm just saying it as a buzzword. No, I'm talking about 3 Antifa, all dressed in black at the time, face mask, hoodie, the entire deal. And they're mocking Officer Bird, and they're giving him a hard time. They're chastising him about the way that he's interacting with this person. And he didn't get an attitude. He asked him, he goes, hey, listen, I understand where you're coming from. What would you like for me to do? This person is clearly inebriated, drunk in public. He can't stand up. He can't move. He doesn't know his name. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know what the date is. What would you have me do? And I'm willing to listen and hear anything that you want to tell me. And I mean that with all sincerity. And these 3 kids, they didn't have an answer. They were hoping that he was going to be rude. They were hoping that he was going to be combative. They've got their phones out. And he's like, no, I'm all ears. Tell me what you guys want me to do in this situation. Point for Officer Bird. 2 days later, we have a guy that won't identify himself. We've made a detainment on a shoplift. We have him upstairs. We have him detained. Officer Bird shows up, comes right in. Hey, what's the problem, big guy? The guy's like, oh, fuck you, blah, 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 blah. Officer Bird's like, hey, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to take you down to my squad car. I'm going to fingerprint you. I'm going to get your information. I'm going to give it to them. We're going to give you a trespass. If you have a warrant, we're taking you in. Like, no BS, no issues whatsoever. Just comes in, does the job, gets the information, makes the arrest on the guy, puts him in the back of the car. And as he comes upstairs and he gives us all this information, these 2 interactions with Officer Bird, and I want to say his name because he deserves to be recognized for how awesome he was in the 2 moments. Between 48 hours, 72 hours, this guy comes in, he does his job greatly, he does his job well, and me and my supervisor are looking at this guy like, where has this guy been? Like, at the time where everybody's viewpoint of the Portland Police Bureau, where everyone's viewpoint of cops all across this country was completely in the tank, this guy was a shining light of what it was supposed to be to do that job. And he comes up, and me and my supervisor are looking at each other, and I said, hey, I got to tell you, sir, like, you were night and day from every experience that we've had with cops over the last 3 months. And he goes, oh, yeah? And my supervisor goes, yeah, like, you know, I had a situation the other day. This is what happened. And then I said, yeah, I had a situation too, and I didn't want to get into it, but this is what I'm dealing with. So I start telling him. And at the time, Officer Bird now has a female partner that's up there with him. I'm telling him my story, and Officer Bird is just looking at me, and he's listening like this. He's shaking his head. And he goes, who was the officer that you were dealing with? Sounds familiar. And I said, his name is Officer, I'm not going to say the guy's name, Officer F. And when I said his name, he looks over at his partner, and his partner looks at him, and they go, oh, shit, oh, no. And I'm like, what? And she goes, he was his field training officer, meaning Officer Bird was this guy that I had the issues with, field training officer. And he goes, hey, let me tell you something. He doesn't belong in policing. He's a bad cop. He goes, he had a opportunity to play professional sports. I'm not going to say what sport it was, but he ended up washing out. And he goes, the entirety of the time that I was training him, all he would tell me was, I used to play pro this. I used to be around this guy. I used to be around this guy. I know this guy. And he said, and I used to tell him every day, that's all well and good, but you're a Portland police officer now. And what you need to focus on is being a good police officer. You're not that anymore. And he goes, he has never been able to get that through his head. And his ego and his lack of desire to just be happy with being a cop is his detriment and his downfall. And he goes, and I'm telling you, man, he doesn't represent us. He doesn't represent the Bureau. He doesn't represent me. And I have told him time and time again, and something that he is going to do is going to get him in trouble. And it sounds like this is going to ultimately be his undoing. I'm paraphrasing. It was so important to me this morning when I told that story, and I've probably only told that story, I'm going to say maybe 3 or 4 times. As painful as that situation was, as hurtful as it was to somebody who at that point in time was wanting to become a police officer, who was wanting to do the job when everybody was running from the fucking responsibility of being a cop, to have someone tell me that they could fucking kill me and then have the department back that shit up. To have an officer like Officer Byrd not only display a 180-degree difference in how he approached doing his job, how he approached dealing with the public, how he approached listening to my situation, my supervisor situation, and then reiterating to us that you're not crazy, because the same issues that you have with this officer are officers that I've had, or are issues that I've had with this officer, right? So as I told that story today, probably for the 3rd time publicly, all day long, it was weighing on my shoulders. You cannot tell this story without telling part 2. You cannot highlight Officer F and all of his shortcomings as an officer and as a person without also highlighting the greatness that came from Officer Byrd. This dichotomy of both sides of this equation, this is what I want to see in terms of transparency from law enforcement officers. When cops are talking about cops, this is what we're expecting. I don't want to hear about, oh, it's just one bad apple. The majority of the cops are good people. Let me tell you about the good people. No, we have to talk about all of it. We got to talk about both sides of the equation. And I have been pushing and advocating for that with all of the people that I know that work in law enforcement, all of the cops that I'm close to, all the cops that are in my life that I care about. I'm like, why aren't you guys talking about the negative aspects of policing and being more vocal about that? You're quick to talk about the good aspects of policing, right? But I need you guys, not me as a security guard, not some activist, right? We need cops talking about this. But then it dawned on me today, you can't ask for that if you're not willing to do that yourself. So it was absolutely imperative that I came on here today and shared with you guys the part 2 of that story. Officer Byrd had told me at that point in time that he was 1 or 2 years away from retirement. Hopefully he's retired, he's living life, he's enjoying himself. But I told him on 2 other occasions following that conversation, where I ran into him, how much I appreciated what he did, how he carried himself, and what he said to me. And that needs to be highlighted. All right. Somebody says, can we get a background on what you're saying? Guys, listen, once I hit end on this video, you'll be able to rewatch it and you can hear everything, okay? This is part 2 of a video that I made earlier this morning about an officer interaction that I had in 2021. Okay. All right. I think that's everything I got. All right. I don't want to go down any other roads or get off in the weeds about anything else. Guys, if this is your first time joining my channel, I run a security guard education and information channel. I also teach and train personal safety, I got my phone plugged in here. That's the beeping that you're hearing in the background. But I appreciate you guys joining me for these streams. I appreciate you listening to me rant and ramble. I want to share my outlook and my vision on doing better for my profession, and also how that relates to policing, how that relates to politics, how that relates to everything, because everything is tied together, right? But that's my story. Hope you guys have a great night, and I will see you on the next stream. Y'all be safe and be great. Be great.